Hello, everyone. This is Chris here with another edition of Philosopher's Ideas between 10 minutes and 10 hours. Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics is a book about the nature of the virtues. It leads to the identification of the life of contemplation as the good life. It also contains his famous doctrine of the golden mean, which is one of the things I will examine here. The subject of Book 2 is the nature of virtue. It starts by drawing a distinction between intellectual and moral virtues. Intellectual virtues come from talents given at birth and teaching. The moral virtues do not come from nature but are cultivated by right conduct. What we get from nature in terms of moral virtues is only potentiality. We subsequently get moral virtues by exercising them. We must learn moral virtues by doing them, just as men become builders by building and lyre players by playing the lyre. It is the same with doing just acts. And this is also confirmed when legislators make the citizens good and form good habits in them, which is something Plato thought to be a proper function of the statesman. It is good or bad habits that produce or destroy virtue. Men become good or bad builders by building well or badly. Otherwise, all men would be born good or bad at their craft, and there would be no need for the teacher. It is a question of developing the habits of good builders. And Aristotle says it is the same with virtues, that here in Book 2, Chapter 1, and this is page 1103 on the margins. Line 15, and by doing the acts that we do in the presence of danger, and being habituated to feel fear or confidence, we become brave or cowardly. So, in order to create virtuous states of character, we must form habits from our very youth. The subject of Aristotle's inquiry will be the examination of the nature of actions, and how we ought to do them for the production of states of character. We assume this means acting in accordance with a right rule. The account of matters of conduct will not produce a fixed and precise science, but we are not powerless to help it along. We are to consider that it is the nature of such things to be destroyed by defect or excess. Exercise for strength can destroy strength if in excess or inadequate. Food and drink also destroy health if above or below a certain amount, while an adequate amount produces and maintains health. Some examples show that temperance, courage, and other virtues are like this. A man who indulges every pleasure becomes self-indulgent, while the man who avoids every pleasure becomes insensible. Here Aristotle is introducing his famous idea of the golden mean, where he says in chapter 2 of book 2 that temperance and courage are destroyed by excess and defect and preserved by the mean. When we recognize this and practice a virtue in a way that is not in a state of excess or defect, we become more able to maintain it as a habit. The strong are capable of undergoing more exertion, and the temperate are more comfortable with abstaining from pleasures. Ultimately, what we mean by calling someone self-indulgent is to say that he is highly annoyed by temperance. The pleasures or pains of those different people effectively become signs of a state of character. Right conduct produces a moral excellence that delights in, or is repulsed by, the things we ought to take pleasure in or avoid, respectively. Virtue will be concerned with pleasures and the pains, as passions and actions are accompanied by pleasures and pains. By pursuing the wrong pleasures or avoiding the wrong pains, we can make ourselves bad men. And so Aristotle concludes that excellence does what is best regarding pleasures and pains, while vice does the contrary. Ultimately, virtue and vice will be concerned with the same things. His argument for this is that there are three objects of both choice and avoidance. The things to choose are the noble, advantageous, and pleasant. And the three things to avoid are the base, injurious, and painful. The good man gets it right, and the bad man gets it wrong about these things. So our inquiry will be about how to feel delight or pain rightly or wrongly. To produce virtue, we need to recognize that the good is in some sense harder, in that it sometimes can be difficult to fight against pleasure. If it is true that the good man uses pleasure and pain well, our concern with virtue is with pleasure and pain, even though virtue is produced and developed by acts. Aristotle provides some clarification on this by saying that we must become just by doing just acts, and we become temperate by doing temperate acts. What do we mean by this if men also do just and temperate acts when they are already just and temperate? In other words, how can it be that we become just by doing just things when the just man is already conceived as the one who delights in doing the just thing? It is like how people who are already grammarians or musicians follow laws of grammar and music. But it is possible to do something that accords with grammar by chance. So really a grammarian is someone who does something grammatical and does it grammatically in accordance with grammatical knowledge that he possesses. The virtuous man, likewise, will become what he is, and become a man comfortable with practicing virtue. And we shall see that for Aristotle, virtue is likewise not just a matter of what is done, but also the manner in which it is done. The arts and character are not totally similar. The arts themselves, having a certain kind of character, does not guarantee that they are done justly or temperatively. The agent who acts must be in a condition such that he must first have knowledge, and secondly choose the acts for their own sake. Thirdly, the acts must proceed from a firm and undamageable character. The possession of knowledge that exists here counts for little weight compared to the other conditions. So here we have conditions for a just act to not be called just: when done without knowledge, by accident, or from the wrong reason of someone who may not have a just character. And this opens the door to having us not judge people who do good things to be good people if, in reality, they are only doing what they are told or think it serves their interests under the circumstances. Aristotle says, actions, then, are called just or temperate when they are such as the just or temperate man would do. That's in Book 2, Chapter 3. The just or temperate man is the one who does it as just and temperate men do them, as most people don't. Like a patient listening attentively to the doctor and then not following his advice, many think they will become good by taking refuge in theory. So once again, Aristotle is here linking virtue to a state of character, even though that state was created by a habit of just or temperate acts. Virtue is what, by virtue of which, we will stand well or badly in relation to the passions. The passions themselves, of appetite, fear, confidence, longing, pity, and so on, are another kind of thing found in the soul. Another thing found in the soul are the faculties, namely our capacities to feel the passions. Of the things in the soul, only states of character can be virtues. Feeling passions alone does not arouse praise or blame, because virtue involves choice, while passions like anger and fear do not. We are also never praised or blamed for the capacity alone to feel negative passions. and this leaves virtue to be a property of a state of character. Specifically, it will be a state of character that promotes excellence in men. And what will that mean? Aristotle says that every virtue or excellence both brings into good condition the thing of which it is the excellence, and makes the work of that thing to be done well. The excellence of a thing makes it good in itself, and makes it do its work well. It will make the man good, and make him do well whatever he does. According to Aristotle, this is achieved by aiming at an intermediate. In anything that is desirable, it is possible to take more, less, or an equal amount. The intermediate as an object will be equidistant from the extremes. If 10 is too many and 2 is too few, 6 will be the intermediate amount. For men, however, the intermediate will be relative to us. For instance, athletes need more nutrition than other adults, who also need to eat more than children eat. The right intermediate amount of whatever food will not be the same for all. Arrangement of it could be called a work of art that does its work well, by the standard of it being diminished if we were to add or take anything away, while the mean or intermediate preserves it. It is likewise with moral virtues that concern themselves with passions and actions. Here, there is also an excess, defect, and an intermediate. Fear, confidence, anger, appetite, pity, pleasure, and pain can all be felt too much or too little. The intermediate and best that is characteristic of virtue has several properties. It is felt at the right time in reference to the right object or people, with the right motive and in the right way. It is the same with actions as well as passions. Excess or defect are forms of failure, while the intermediate is praised and is successful. Excess and defect are characteristics of vice, and the mean is characteristic of virtue. In a situation, the man of practical wisdom will determine the specifics by a rational principle. Not every passion or action admits of a mean. Spite, envy, adultery, murder do not have excesses or deficiencies. They are themselves bad, and thus there is no right way to feel or do them. In unjust, cowardly, or voluptuous actions, we also do not expect that there should be a mean, excess, or deficiency. For then, we would have to further have an excess of excess, or a deficiency of deficiency. There is an excess and deficiency of virtues like courage and temperance, because they are themselves intermediates. So far we have a conception of virtue that Aristotle has defined in terms of its genus and differentia, and I'll take only about a minute to explain that. He states that the genus or broad group to which virtue belongs is states of character. When we define anything such as a sofa by rule of genus et differentia, we may say that a sofa is a piece of furniture that is designed to seat at least 3 persons. Furniture becomes the genus or broad group to which sofa belongs, along with the kitchen table and the bed, while the differentia, the thing that differentiates it or sets it apart from others in the group, is that it is designed to seat at least 3 persons. Man as rational animal is defined in the same way. We are the animal that can use reason. So virtue is a state of character that aims at an intermediate or mean. The individual virtues that a man may have as part of his character are those that feature a disposition toward an intermediate. The 3 kinds of disposition, excess, deformity, and the mean are contrary to and in some sense oppose each other. The brave man may appear rash to the coward, and the temperate man may appear self-indulgent to the insensible man who avoids all pleasures. The greatest difference will be between the extremes, so we have a continuum. And as was implied before, the ideal mean in the case of virtue is not necessarily the midpoint. Cowardice opposes courage more so than rashness does. There, the deficiency is further away from the intermediate, but in the case of temperance, it is the excess of self-indulgence that is more opposed and further away from temperance. One reason for this lies in the thing itself, where, for instance, rashness is thought as something more like courage than cowardice is like courage. Another reason can come from within ourselves. We tend naturally toward pleasures, and this leads self-indulgence to be more contrary to temperance. Under this criterion, it will not be an easy task to become a virtuous man. The first step would be to attempt to depart most from the vice that is most contrary to the virtue. So to be courageous, we try to depart most from cowardice, and for temperance, depart most from self-indulgence. We consider the things toward which we are carried away, recognizable by the pleasures and pains that we feel. Then we drag ourselves toward the contrary extreme and reach the mean. We guard against what is pleasant to us because we do not judge it impartially. We are now going into Book 3 of the work, where we will also find the start of the explications of the various virtues, starting with courage. Now, it is only on matters of choice or actions of which we are the cause that we bestow praise or blame. Here, the voluntary has been defined by Aristotle in a way that indicates that it occurs when the cause is within the actor. The question then may be posed as to whether what is within our choice may be a narrower category than the voluntary. As it happens, Aristotle has thought of this and accepts it. Children and lower animals engage in actions on the spur of the moment that we would call voluntary here, but are not done in choice. The chosen is not a matter of appetite or anger when irrational creatures do not act on choice. Choice can also not be the same thing as wish, for we can wish for impossible things, such as immortality. Wish is not related to what we can do, but is about an end, while choice relates to a means. Choice will then relate to what lies within our power, and so the foregoing indicates that not everything that is voluntary will be an object of choice. Choice seems to involve some rational thought, and to be the result of deliberation. We deliberate about the things that are within our power, and which can be done by our own efforts. This may be different among different classes of men, given differences in power. We deliberate about means and not ends, just as the physician deliberates about ways to heal without deliberating about whether he should heal. The end is assumed, and what is evaluated is the question of the best and most productive means. When we come upon an impossibility, we then abandon the search. By the possible, we mean what can be done through our efforts or with the help of friends. And so Aristotle says in Book 3, Chapter 3, that man is a moving principle of actions. Now, deliberation is about the things to be done by the agent himself, and actions are for the sake of things other than themselves. So the end is what we wish for. The means are what we deliberate about and choose, while actions concerning the means are according to choice. Virtue is concerned with the means to the end, and therefore virtue and vice are within our power to act, or to not act, in a way that is noble or base. As to the virtues in general, Aristotle summarizes their nature by saying that they are the means and also a state of character in terms of their genus. They tend by their nature to the doing of voluntary acts as the right rule prescribes. States of character are produced by a gradual process of actions that are in our control from the beginning to the end of the process. Therefore, states of character are also voluntary and thus subject to praise or blame. Here one might ask about choosing the right end or goal of our actions. If virtue is just a means to an end, and if Aristotle will insist that an act is not virtuous if not done for the right reasons, what then is the goal at which the right reasons aim? In books 1 and 10, Aristotle deals with these issues. The short answer is that he provides arguments that happiness is a proper standard of moral conduct. The happiness he has in mind is a phenomenon of eudaimonia, where virtue is its own reward. In the state of eudaimonia, it will be the life of contemplation that turns out to be the good life. As an example of a virtue being analyzed by Aristotle, I will proceed to deal with the issue of courage. It may be broadly considered to be the intermediate related to feelings of fear and confidence. One of the matters that complicates the issue of courage is that of the apparent bravery of someone who is just a fearless person. Courage, however, is a term we generally apply to he who acts in spite of his fears, potentially for some higher purpose. In general, we may fear a number of evils, including disgrace, poverty, disease, death, that are things we might potentially ought not to fear, and thus might not in the situation call a person brave who does fear them. Such men may turn coward in the face of war. We must therefore consider the question of what terrible things with which the brave man is concerned. Even with death, the brave man may not be concerned in all circumstances. A man may be called brave if he is fearless in the face of a noble death, pertaining to a war or other emergency. However, at sea, the brave may be fearless, but the sailor is hopeful because of his experience and therefore is not brave in the same way. And so the matter gets complicated, and we need some kind of criterion of when one has achieved the virtue of courage. What is terrible is not the same for all men, but some things are terrible beyond human strength, and are thus terrible to any sensible man. Some other terrible things within our power to defeat will differ in magnitude or degree. In either case, the brave man will be dauntless even in the face of his fear. The rule directs that he will face those fears and act as he ought to for honor's sake. The three main faults are fearing what one should not fear, fearing something when we should not fear it, and fearing as we should not. This will also apply to situations that inspire confidence, such as the experience of the sailor. Aristotle sums it up in Book 3, Chapter 7, and this is margin page 1115, around line 15. He says, "The man, then, who faces and who fears the right things, and from the right motive, in the right way and at the right time, and who feels confidence under the corresponding conditions, is brave. For the brave man feels and acts according to the merits of the case, and in whatever way the rule directs." So here again we have a criterion of virtue recognizing that it must be done in the right way and for the right reasons. This is consistent with the theme of virtue being a state of character. Courage is noble, and it is for a noble end that the courageous man acts in spite of fear, as the virtue of courage directs. Now, for a better sense of what courage is, we consider how it differs from its corresponding vices of excess and deficiency. There are actually two types of person who are in excess of courage. There are those who have no particular name to describe them, but who exceed in fearlessness to a degree that they may be considered madmen or insensible. Those who have no fear of earthquakes or tidal waves may fall into this category. The rash man, by contrast, is the one who has excessive confidence in the face of the terrible. The rash man is a boastful pretender to courage, and imitates the courageous man. The rash man, however, does not hold his ground against just anything that might be truly terrible, and so he has a mixture of cowardice within. The coward, exhibiting the opposite vice of defect, is he who fears what he ought not to, and as he ought not to. He may be lacking in confidence, but he is most conspicuous through his excess of fear in painful situations. The coward may also be a despairing sort of person, because confidence is the work of a hopeful disposition. The coward, the rash man, and the courageous man are differently disposed toward the same object. Therefore, courage is the mean with respect to what inspires confidence or fear. Courage chooses and endures things because it is noble to do so and base not to do so. However, it only applies to what is noble. Aristotle's example of something not really being courage due to it not being noble is the man who dies in order to escape from poverty or something painful. Such a person he regards as a coward because it is a flying away from what is troublesome. Aristotle now considers 5 situations in which courage may at least appear to be exhibited. One is the courage of the citizen soldier, or what is called a civic courage. Now, this might lead us to think of the modern-day policeman, but can potentially apply to rebels with a cause, provided they are in fact not part of the establishment. And what indicates this, I think, is that Aristotle says that those with civic courage face dangers in the form of penalties imposed by laws and reproaches, but they have in mind an honor they may achieve and a disgrace they seek to avoid. This courage is most like the virtue of courage. Those who are also compelled are not so brave. One ought to be brave because it is noble and not because one is under compulsion. A second consideration is where experience gets associated with courage, which Aristotle says led Socrates to think that courage is knowledge. Professional soldiers exhibit this in times of war, where those with the most experience seem more brave, when in fact they are more knowledgeable. Sometimes then it is really not the bravest who fight best. They may turn coward when the numbers and equipment are not in their favor, while people with civic courage die at their post. The third situation is where a strong passion is reckoned as courage. Brave men are often passionate. However, lust leading adulterers to do brave things is a counterexample where it obviously should not be called courage. Ultimately, then, passion alone cannot be a mark of courage. It becomes part of courage only when combined with the right choices and motives. A fourth situation related to experience is people who have become sanguine due to a confidence they have acquired in facing dangers. Drunks may also behave in a similar way, although from a different cause. Either way, they think they are strong and can suffer nothing, but when an adventure fails, they run. The work of the brave man is to face what seems and is terrible to him, because it is noble and disgraceful not to do so. Thus, the sanguine man is not showing courage. A fifth and similar situation occurs where someone may appear brave, but is in fact just ignorant of the dangers being faced. The sanguine man may hold his ground for a time, but those who are deceived about the facts are likely to fly in the face of discovering a danger. Thus, the examples we can look to as paradigms of courage are civic courage, or a combination of strong passion with the virtue of courage, applied in the right manner, at the right time, and for the right reason. This completes Aristotle's description of the characters of brave men and those thought to be brave. In terms of criticism, it is often said that Aristotle, in his Ethics, is mostly just accepting uncritically the opinions that were commonly held in his time and place. This is shown in how often he talks about what is praised or blamed without arguing about whether that something should be praised or blamed. However, there are times when he does reject a proposed theory as absurd. In terms of precision, he warns the reader that he does not consider his subject to be a precise science, and in my opinion, he delivers on that warning at times. As for his table of virtues, there are some examples where there seems to be no word or definite idea of the excess or defect, and we have seen this with the two excesses of courage, one of which having no name. So his chart is not such a complete and tidy explanation. It does not all fit perfectly like a jigsaw puzzle. This completes one of the major themes in the Nicomachean Ethics, the essential nature of virtue as the golden mean. There are other interesting ideas in the book, such as arguments in favor of happiness as the standard of the good, and the life of contemplation being the good life, as well as a healthy section devoted to friendship. So if you enjoyed it, click on Philosopher Out there to check out my other videos. Hit the like and subscribe buttons, and thanks for watching.